and to hear what, about funerals and stuff, come on, 2 blocks away, weekends, this is an art district. We're trying to change this area. We're trying to make 125th Street some reason to come there. This is not a commercial business. This is a as-it-need business. This doesn't hire anyone. What, the funeral cars? What, the attendant? What, the person in the office? Are you telling me that this is going to bring in business? It's going to bring in the dead. That's what it's going to bring in.
Which is a business.
That's
Mr.
all I have to
McDeal.
say. Okay, McDeal.
Oh, okay.
It's you, Vice Chair.
It's you.
Virgo.
Okay. I have a couple questions. So from what I'm seeing, you're going to be embalming the bodies there on site?
Yeah, and the chemicals.
We will have the capacity to do that, yes, and that's what they do typically in funeral homes. And it's licensed
Okay.
by the county and licensed by the state. And there are very strict regulations to make sure that it's done in a proper and correct and sanitary way.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Mr. Joseph, you have all the red bag relationships and contracts and all that kind of thing?
Well, everything approved by Durham. This is Durham concern, not, it's
Okay.
already there in the city.
Okay. Pardon?
It's already there in the city.
In other words, it's licensed by Durham and strictly regulated by
Okay.
Durham,
I
not by the
noticed-
city of
I
North
noticed
Miami.
I
So
noticed-
one of the conditions is a certificate of use from the county.
Right. I notice on one part it says embalming room, and then the other thing it says storage. So I guess it's sort of like a multi-use room?
This is gonna be a bombing.
There will be an embalming room.
Okay, because in one of the plans it says storage, so I assume.
Yes, that's not accurate, and there will be an embalming room. Obviously, there might be storage there, but, you know,
Okay.
and frankly, when I have an opportunity for rebuttal, I will try to address some of the other things
Okay.
that we've heard.
All right, one of the other things too, Mr. Joseph, is security. You know, one of assuming that the people will walk, assuming it's not raining and et cetera, and people are gonna walk back and forth between the home and the parking lot at Shalom, are you gonna have security in place to make sure that these people can transverse securely between the home and the parking lot? Because,
Absolutely.
I will
I'm gonna have a couple attendants to work there.
I will answer that
Okay.
in two regards.
Okay.
First of all, we have agreed that we will have at least 2 attendants for, any funeral where there's the need for that. We will have it, and they will attend to the parking, direct cars as needed, keep people from parking inappropriately. We will also have a van in order to transport people when we have the opportunity and the need arises from the parking lot at the church to the funeral home.
right.
Okay, so it's not like everyone's going to have to walk in the street, and it's just not the way it's really going to
Okay.
work.
Well, and assuming that, there is, and I only live a few blocks from the Shalom Church, and I've been by there on Saturday and Sundays, and it is overflowing. So do you have a backup plan, parking lot, where people can go and, because it's so isolated from any real parking areas? Are you going to use the lot across the street, and do you have a relationship with them, or what?
We have had discussions with any number of the neighbors, and some of them have informally told us they have no problem, especially if they're not using the space. So for example, you have across the street, you have St. La, you have, empty, you have a lot of parking in the area that is available, and certainly if we need it, that's why we will have attendants to direct people and to keep people from parking
Do
inappropriately.
you have anything contractually with these other people?
No, and I understand why, people are reluctant to enter into a lease, and I understand, why people, they don't want to, You know, they don't want to make a commitment and then find that they're in a situation that they don't want to be in. We've found what we consider to be a very good place. The actual, you know, visitations, when most of them are going to be in the evening between 6 and 8 and 6 and 9, when the businesses on West Dixie are closed.
No one's crossing the street.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the condominium's open because that's a 24-hour situation. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, the recording studio, he's got a boat parked in his parking lot and it's empty. Okay.
All right, guys.
Okay.
And Mr. Woolen,
Wait,
got it.
please
wait a minute.
do not,
I have-
I
okay, it's not needed.
I have-
Yes, ma'am.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Okay. Our counsel for the board made a suggestion as to a condition early on. Is that something that the client is willing to accept as a
The
condition?
applicant is willing to accept the condition. We have no problem with having parking reviewed, and we intend to be a good neighbor, and we're happy to provide, you know, Mr. Pierre's business card and cell phone number to anyone who's here or anyone else. But let's understand, the ingress and egress to, for example, the condominium next door, there's only ingress and egress there from 135th. There's no way into their parking area from 10th Avenue. So the reality is that it's not going to interfere with their parking unless they want to be parking in the cul-de-sac, which is the street that was closed. Fine, then it's a tow-away zone and they won't be there. That's okay. We don't plan to park there.
Yeah, but it's not you.
We are going to observe the law, and when somebody sees someone parked on the sidewalk in their driveway, whatever, it's a quick call to the police, and they come and they start writing the tickets.
Excuse
But
me,
it's not gonna
ladies
happen.
and gentlemen, there really shouldn't be comment while other people are speaking. You were respected
you.
when you spoke. Let's have a little bit of respect for the speaker.
How can we be
Ms. Jo-
sure?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
My
You
concern is
waited.
the parking, because I understand the residents, and at the same time, I understand that he has a business that he must run.
Ma'am, first of all, just so our record is clear, we do meet the city's standards for parking. However, because we are sensitive to that issue, we have gone to the expense, and we've arranged for off-site parking. It is suitable parking. We have committed to having attendants outside in the lot to make sure that people's cars are handled. I've indicated to you, actually, you know, Mr. Pierre has indicated, based on his experience of many years in the business, we're talking about 25 to 45 people at your average attendant. And I agree with Ms. Philippe, which is that, and I indicated that most people who are members of a church, they want to go out at their church, and that's where they have their viewing, and that's where they have their service and their sermon. And to address something that Ms. Cohen said, and I apologize because I should have addressed it or corrected it sooner, but I mean, the architect's drawing of the 100 seats in there, that's not what's going to be there, and I don't know who commissioned him or had him do that. I've spoken to Mr. Joseph Pierre, and he anticipates they'll have 50 seats, and that's what it's about. That's what this building really comfortably can accommodate.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think it's important for the board to understand the standards by which this decision needs to be made.
I'm trying.
Okay. It's very often when an application is presented to a board that citizens come out and object. And the question is, first, what is the standard that the board has to apply, and how to evaluate what it is that the citizens are saying? So there's appellate court that's oversees this jurisdiction is called the Third District Court of Appeal. And in the year 2000, there was a case, Jesus Fellowship versus Miami-Dade County, in which there was a church that that filed an application to allow a private school. And many citizens came out in opposition to it, and the county commission responded by reducing the number of students that would be allowed from like 550 to, let's say 150. It was actually 524 to 150 students. And the court set the standard by which special exceptions should be reviewed. And I'd like to read the couple of sentences to you. An applicant seeking special exceptions and unusual uses, which is not relevant here, need only demonstrate to the decision-making body that its proposal is consistent with the land use plan, that the uses are specifically authorized as special exceptions in the applicable zoning district, and that the requests meet with the applicable zoning code standards of review. If this is accomplished, then the application must be granted unless the opposition carries its burden, which is to demonstrate that the applicant's requests do not meet the standards and are in fact adverse to the public interest. So one of the things you need to understand about competent substantial evidence is that most citizen statements are opinion. That is not competent substantial evidence. Competent substantial evidence from a citizen has to be fact-based. So when they talk about the value of property, a citizen is not competent to talk about value of property unless they are like a real estate agent or some other professional in the real estate business. Similarly, with regard to traffic and parking, that is not something that citizens can typically testify to. What is competent substantial evidence before you are the recommendations of staff and the application and the code requirements. And all of those at this point, if you look at the competent substantial evidence standard, point to approval. I can read you what it says about, there's another court, also the Third District Court of Appeal. Citizen testimony in zoning matter is perfectly permissible and constitutes substantial competent evidence so long as it is fact-based. So it's up to you to review what has been said. I don't think the number of funeral homes in an area is relevant. This application stands on its own. If it was relevant, there would be a code standard that said you cannot have more than X funeral homes within 1,000 feet or 2,500 feet. And that's very common for liquor stores and other kinds of uses, not funeral homes in your code. The other thing, and I don't know if you remember from last time, if you look at the permitted uses in the C1 district, what's permitted not having to come before the board, there's a lot of uses that are more impactful to the neighborhood than a funeral home. And to tell you the truth, it really surprises me that there would be so much concern about a funeral home when they could do things, and I can go through the list if you want, but it's really vehicle service. They could put a garage, a mechanic's garage there, which would be much more impactful than a funeral home. A bar lounge is permitted without a public hearing. You know, people, in my understanding, people who, or my experience, people who go to funerals are not rowdy on the street, like people
Why
who
are
are
we
attending
getting from the audience? Please. Everyone had their chance. Let the attorney finish, please.
Okay, so just going through the list of what would be permitted without a public hearing, a restaurant, a sports cafe, a brew pub, a banquet hall. Those are things that would generate much more of an impact on the neighborhood. The medical marijuana facility would be permitted without a public hearing. So you have to decide, but I'm trying to give you some perspective on what the law would permit and what the standards are for your review.
Can I make a
Thank you.
comment, though? Am I allowed to make a comment? I won't go off on a tangent, But this parking license agreement is illusory. It holds no water. You don't have, okay, that's going to be a requirement.
Right, but they're only responsible for required parking.
Right.
And according to staff, they satisfy required parking.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
And, hold on, and again, I have to go back, and I know we have to take each case separately. And I remember it was the issue when that other funeral home came, and we were all up in arms about the parking, but we've not had any issues, or at least one that has come to the city where, and then they themselves said that if there is, when they have a viewing that is a large gathering, that they will take it, and they have taken it to their larger sites. So, you know, I
Madam
get
Chair.
it.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr.
Um,
McDermott.
In listening to what our council has advised us as to the Third Court of Appeals and what is and what isn't, and listening to him talk about, what could be there, and I understand that even if a liquor store wanted to be there, we would have to address parking issues and all that other kind of thing as well, and maybe you couldn't, even though maybe it's permitted, perhaps because of parking and other issues, it couldn't be there. But in listening to his advice with the Third Circuit, and what he has advised us, for discussion, I would like to make a motion to approve this applicant as long as we have that caveat or condition that they come back within a year for review of the impact of it on the community and the surrounding neighborhood, and perhaps maybe we're going to tell them they have to have a police officer or something to meet higher standards to make sure that the neighborhood is not affected. But it appears from what the attorney is telling us and his advice that, and I think, as I say, I think that if they have to come back in a year as to review of how it's impacting the neighborhood, and I know that Mr. Cook is very good at following up on things, and this is not going to drop off his radar somewhere. I think that may be a way to address the legal issues as well as the impact on the neighborhood, so that so that they can move on with the business, and hopefully we can protect the neighborhood at the same time.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve with these conditions by Mr. McDermott. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. We have a motion which has been seconded.
For
So,
discussion.
For discussion. Any more discussion?
I just want to say, for the record, after the council's explanation of our obligation and our responsibilities, I think that really put into hindsight, because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm very conflicted because of the resistance and the feelings of the community that is tugging at me. But I also understand that we have policies we have to follow. And after hearing your counsel, I have no more discussion but to vote.
I have just one statement to make. I'm an attorney. I could read opinions upon opinions and upon opinions that they conflict with each other. And it's always based upon the terms and the set of facts regarding that particular case when they come up with a decision. So you've picked a good case to make your case. But I would like to see what the other cases say.
Madam Chair, you in voting, forgive me, and my apologies, ma'am. I know we want to move forward. I just want to address something that Ms. Coyne stated as it relates to the agreement. I read the agreement.
Which one?
The parking agreement. And so I know what it says. Thus
Okay.
why I had as a condition that it would have to be reviewed by the city attorney's office to bring before
Well,
we
it has
make
to
an
have a
approval.
contract. This is not a contract.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I
Okay.
can
The
see your
person
point.
has to give.
I
Okay.
concede your point,
All right.
but the purpose of our review is to make sure it has teeth and that it has some culpability on the parking arrangement and that it will fulfill its policy. And if it doesn't, then
doesn't.
That's part of the review of the Development Review Committee and making sure that the site is fulfilling its need and to mitigate any impact that it would have with the neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Cook.
Madam Chair.
With that, may we have a roll call, please,
There's a motion on the floor
for approval?
for approval made by Mr. McDermott and seconded by Ms. Joseph to approve the funeral home with the conditions that a certificate of use and business tax receipt be obtained, that prior to the issuance of any building permits, that the applicant must obtain Development Review Committee approval. Prior to the issuance of the DRC approval, the parking license agreement must be reviewed and approved by applicable city staff pursuant to LDRs or the Land Development Regulations, Section 5-1401H1, and the Miami-Dade County permits for the use of embalming chemicals on site, or a letter from the county that no permits are required shall be submitted to the Community Planning and Development Department before the issuance of certificates of occupancy. Also to include the condition that the applicant shall return to the board in approximately 1 year to have staff and the board review the adequacy of the conditions of approval to address adverse impacts on the neighborhood and to modify or impose new conditions as needed to mitigate such impacts, but not to consider revocation or suspension of the special exception approval. Ms. Philippe,
Yes.
Mr. McDermott,
Yes.
Ms. Arnold,
Yes.
Ms. Cohen,
No.
Ms. Joseph.
Yes.
The vote is 4-1. The motion has passed.
Thank you very much. Thank you all of you.
Lorna, you're so efficient. Okay, continue. Excuse me, we're not done?
Oh, our bad.
We're arranging dinner over here.
Okay, old business?
Yeah.
Old business?
No.
Let's move on. Mr. Cook, do we have old business?
Madam Chair, there is no old business.
Any new business?
No new business, Madam Chair.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So move.
So moved.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let me tell my neighbor we're ready to go eat. All right.